September 7th, 1938. The patient frequently indulges in recriminations expressed in an explosive tone of voice. This morning she threw away the milk, saying it was full of urine, spittle, and all kinds of other filth. Crazed, she hears voices that order her to do things. She says she heard children singing and that they were locked up in a school. January 20th, 1939. Introverted, dazed, cannot focus on anything. When questioned and stimulated, she starts crying and weeping. At other times, she laughs. June 1st. Apathetic. Eats very little. She refuses to be touched. Does not respond. Spends her time in the grounds. The cooks report that she sits on a bench in front of the kitchens. October 14th. Return of impulsive behavior. This morning she asked for 2 eggs to make zabayoni, but when she got them, she threw them up in the air. Excited, clamorous, slightly confused, takes her clothes off. December 8th. Tied to bed for 15 days. High-spirited, tends to make witty comments and use vulgar words. Laughs hysterically and pleasures herself. The nurses report that about 2 weeks ago she remained in the showers on her own and didn't want to leave. They said that when they took her away, she swore at them and then lashed out and bit them. 2 nurses had to be treated for their injuries. They've kept her tied to the bed since then. Transferred to the slightly agitated ward, from the care of Dr. B to the care of Dr. C. I was with Amara in the showers. My memories are terrifying. They're not real, are they? December 15th. Dr. C. Patient notes. The abnormality of her psychic state has induced her to lead a life which is irregular and tends towards delinquency. Of fickle and flighty character, she regularly discards her household duties and engages in occasional prostitution. Prostitution? No one would have ever believed a lunatic, let alone a lunatic who lives in the worst sort of sin. Could such a person ever have been subject to sexual violence? Certainly not. Her mental deficiency makes her deaf to the reprimands of her family. She has shown suicidal tendencies. She was brought to the ward yesterday, agitated and hysterical. Treated with cardiazol, 2 injections a week for 5 weeks. They were only trying to confuse us with the therapy, and my God, they succeeded. It was as if they wanted to instill the madness into us. June 2nd. After a long period of calm and improvement, the patient is very agitated today and vehemently refuses to submit to a gynecological examination. She swears and curses those helping her, flailing her arms and hitting them. According to reports by Dr. B, the patient has been subjected to periodic checkups since she had a spontaneous abortion about 2 years ago in her 3rd month of pregnancy. Conception occurred after she had sexual intercourse with a stranger who sneaked into the hospital grounds. Details are contained in the charges filed at police headquarters in Volterra, a copy of which is attached to these clinical notes. ES therapy. That's how the reality is concealed. It has all been planned very carefully. June 13th. The nurses report that she descended into a state of great mental confusion after receiving her mother's letter. She threw her soup over another inmate because she was very anxious, and then punched a nurse. Impulsive, flails about her. She rails against the doctor in vulgar terms while he is examining her, lashes out and spits. Block all correspondence to give the patient no further reason to become agitated. August 20th, tied to bed. The nurses report that the patient is extremely agitated after the visit of a relative or family friend. 2 days later, she is still shouting all the time that he commands her, that she must obey and harm herself, and that she is not Charlotte. All visits forbidden, constrained to bed, and intensification of ES therapy until we achieve results. No contact with the outside. That way nobody knew what was happening within these walls. March 3rd. Alert, correct attitude, replies when questioned. The nurses report that the patient is calm, she washes and looks after herself. She affirms the existence of a certain Amara. She says that Amara is a patient who disappeared when she was moved to this ward. No confirmation. Probably a regressive hallucination. Evaluate transfer. Did I imagine Amara? That's not possible. She was there. I know she was there. I feel it. She must have left some traces of her presence. We can look for her things in the storeroom containing the bundles of the patient's belongings on the upper floor. These are Amara's things, I'm certain. Amara, there she is. She existed. She really did exist. There she is, my friend. Here we are together. How could I have imagined for a single moment that she never existed? March 12th, 1938. The young girl Renee arrived today. Poor thing, she was terrorized. You see, she remembers the first time we met. I talked to her mother, the dear lady, and she expressed her fears to me, and I promised I'd keep an eye on her daughter. The lady told me her daughter's doll had been taken away, and this worried her, because when she becomes depressed, as she is now, Renee barricades herself in her room and can't communicate. The doll becomes her voice, eyes, and ears. Dr. B said I'll soon get out of here. I'm sorry. I'm so sad to leave Renee. I won't be able to protect her anymore. My poor friend. She was hoping to be able to get out of here, but nobody ever leaves this place. That poor girl is really ill. I am the only one she ever speaks to. I told her I was leaving, and she stared at me, saying that I would never leave. It was quite unnerving, and then she started to cry. I felt like crying too. She didn't say anything else. What worries me is that I'm sure that terrible man is watching her. He was the one who brought her here, and of all the good people, why did it have to be him? She knew. I told her everything. She knew about that man. That's why they wanted to make her disappear from my life. But I instructed a nurse friend of mine to keep an eye on her, and I'm sure she will, because she's a good woman. Her friend the nurse. I vaguely remember. She worked on this ward. Let's look for signs of the nurse in the nurse's room on the upper floor. She worked mostly in the Marigliano pavilion. Let's get out of here and find that pavilion. Renee was alone here. Charlotte had abandoned her. And without Charlotte, Renee couldn't communicate with the outside world. Mother knew that. June 1935. After much theorizing and practice in clinics for the privileged, the moment for action has finally arrived. Volterra is the right place. It's an avant-garde hospital, the perfect place for a doctor who really wants to make a difference. November 20th. Crossing the threshold of the asylum was similar to entering another dimension. A world of smells, noises, and images which it is almost impossible to imagine, describe, or explain. August 1936. The situation is similar to that in many other institutions. The department is overcrowded. Hundreds of patients are supervised by a handful of nurses who are forced to tie the more distressed ones to their beds or to radiators. They do 24-hour shifts. It's impossible to work like this. We doctors rarely see the female patients, and it's the nurses who tell us what's happening to the women. The overpowering stench in the wards, the constant din of shouts and voices that are barely recognizable as human, dirty, naked bodies devoid of any dignity. The lunatic asylum gets under your skin and wears you down. I often consider resigning. I feel useless, impotent, a sort of merciful jailer, a mercy that helps no one and only helps to ease my conscience. March 15th, 1938. Dramas are played out before my eyes every single day, and I try to distance myself from them and just do the best I can. But a girl arrived some days ago. I couldn't avoid her gaze. All she asked in her dignified silence was not to be ripped away from her world. And me. I'm old enough to be her father, the father she never had, who didn't want her, who rejected her without even knowing her. I too refused what she asked me. I couldn't do anything but add my signature and consign her to hell. A danger to herself and to others, and a cause of public scandal. This was what was written on the accompanying note from the police headquarters. It was difficult not to agree with it. How much more violence must this poor girl be subjected to? Her gaze is so intense, so far removed from the carefree nature which should be the joyous hallmark of her age. I cried myself to sleep in my solitude. I kept thinking about those sad and frightened eyes staring at me. She's kind to everyone, even me. I felt a little better when I saw her. The sick children laughed and played with her. Not even they could frighten me. Don't annoy Renee. She's a princess here. Didn't you know? She told stories. She said there was a war out there. But they stared at me and frightened me. They would come to look for me in the evening, and then no one would have protected me. Not even you, Charlotte. Am I right?